Well, good morning everybody. We're here at our home port of Airlie Beach down at Port of Airlie, and the weather's turned a little bit miserable on us, so we're going to catch up on a bit of maintenance on the down in the engine room down below decks, and that fundamentally constitutes changing fuel filters, oil filters, and overview of the system. I'll go through the cooling water system and check the water pump impellers, etc., and just make sure everything's fundamentally okay. This is our engine room down here. I'll turn the lights on so we can see a bit better. And yeah, it's got fairly good access to the whole compartment. It's reasonably well laid out down there, but it is a bit of a yoga exercise routine for the day. So I'm going to rip up all the floorboards and clean all the bilges out and give it a bit of love, so to speak. So without further ado, let's get stuck into it. I'm doing it. It's not an instructional video by any means. Now, what I'm doing is I usually go through the fuel system and the oil system, lubrication system. Now I've got a, hang on, I'll get down inside so you can see a little bit better. This is our fuel manifold through the back of the boat, where we can do transfers from port and starboard tanks, or fuel, for want of a better term, scrub either tank or the whole system. Now, our primary fuel filter is this Raycor filter here, which I've just pulled completely to pieces, put a new element in it and cleaned it all out. So it did have a little bit of muck in it, but not a lot. We'd probably put about 5,000 litres of fuel through that, but it had a little bit of stuff in there. But we're running a new type of injector cleaner and another brand of sludge deterrent now, so hopefully that'll give us some better performance in the future. So we've got two tanks. That's our starboard tank there. They both hold 125 US gallons, or about 550 litres. That's our port tank over there. It's pretty basic. That's a shut-off valve just for the sight glass, and then we've got the main fuel out. The return comes into the top of the unit. We've got our fuel scrubbing system here, which basically, depending on where you want to scrub from, which is the valve selection at the stern on the bulkhead there to the lazarette, you can scrub either. It just sort of sucks it in through this Raycor filter. I've got a new one there which I'll put in shortly. Through this magnetised, I don't know what that does, but anyway, it's a magnetiser that gets any metal particles out of it, I would imagine, but they say that stops algae growing, but I'm a bit dubious. Sounds like a bit of a witch doctor thing to me. Suction gauge to tell you when your filter's blocked. It's never really worked, actually. I should get a new one of those. And the fuel pump. So basically all you do is select which valves you want to suck from and return to, and away you go. If I had half a tank of fuel, I would select to pump from one tank to the other, so I drain all the fuel out of that tank and suck right from the bottom. Well, you're sucking from the bottom all the time anyway, but get as much out as you can and run through here. There is a slight little bit of sediment in there at the moment, so I'll strip all that down and clean it out. I took that Raycor filter off, the fuel line was getting a little bit hard, so I've put a new fuel line in, both on the suction and delivery side of that fuel filter. You can see all the valves here to select which tank I'm running the engine from. I usually select both tanks, that way it uses fuel from both sides and doesn't list one side to the other as you start using fuel. And all these others are from port tank to scrubber, from scrubber. Yeah, so that's basically what you do there. And I've run a new fuel line through. Excuse the dirty bilge, I've been working in here. And I'll put a new fuel line up here to the lift pump on the tank. Just about to screw in the new fuel filter and then charge the systems up. So what I'll do now is I'll get the that fuel filter screwed on loosely, and then I'll manually fill this one here till I get it completely full. Open both the valves, and then I'll use the manual prime on the lift pump to charge this fuel filter here, and that one's it turns onto there. So and fill that one up, and then tighten him right up, and hopefully we won't get a lot of air in the system. I'll start the unit up. Most of the time it will start up and get rid of it. Most of the time it will get the air out of the system and keep running, but once or twice I've had to bleed the injectors. So just depending on how good I am at getting the air out of the system. Anyway, I'll carry on and get back to you a bit later on. Well, that all went quite successfully actually. I've primed up that filter, the fuel filter, using the lift pump manual prime. Didn't take a lot to do it at all actually, and I thought I might have been getting a bit of oil because the prime lever didn't seem to go firm. So I took this hose off and just made sure that the fuel had gravity fed from the primary filter on the lazarette bulkhead to there, which it had done. So I put it back on, topped it all up again, got a bit of pressure on it, and then I thought, all right, here we go, let's see if it'll start and run, which it did. So I've run it for about 5 minutes just to get a bit of temperature in the oil, which I'm now changing. I've used my suction device here, which is now sucking the oil out of the dipstick hole, so making a lot of mess around the place. So this is a fairly, how would I say, elongated process because it sucks through a fairly small tube. It's got a little bit of temperature in it, it's just sort of lukewarm, so that'll hopefully speed it up a bit. Yeah, so now I'll sit back and wait for all that to evacuate, and I generally drop that drain plug out of the bottom there to get the last half a litre out, and I'll change the main engine oil filter at the same time, which I'll start doing now, I think. Well, here we are. It was at about 3:30 in the afternoon now. I started just after lunch, I think, after we got all the parts from down at the at Repco actually. Bit of a plug for Repco. While I'm still waiting for this oil to drain out, I've decided well, it was on the agenda anyway, is to check the raw water impeller, which has done about 400 hours, and I've been told that you should do them or replace them every 250 odd hours. I've just pulled it apart. It was in reasonably good condition considering the number of hours it's done, but it did have one tongue hanging off the impeller, so I've put a new one in there just to make sure everything's good as new, basically. So I've got the new oil filter on. I've charged the new oil filter with fresh oil before I screwed it on to help maintain oil pressure as we start up as quickly as possible. And yeah, just sucking the last of the oil out, then I'll put the dipstick back in its hole and charge it with oil, and away we go. The genset I haven't worried about this service. I generally do both the genset and the main at the same time, but since we put the solar on the boat, the genset, we used to run about 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, and since we put the solar on, we'd run it 2 hours every third or fourth day, and that's generally weather dependent. We've had quite a few cloudy days on our trip up to Cairns and back, so we found we've done about 12, 14 hours on the genset. It used to do twice as many engine hours as the main engine, and now it seems to be doing less than half the engine hours of the main engine. So that's good news, both for fuel economy and for wear and tear. So that'll be getting done probably next time. I'll just keep an eye on the engine hours, and we'll make a decision when it comes to service time again. So we're doing this one every 250 hours. It's done about 220 on this service, and but we'll be on route back to southeast Queensland when it would have been due. So I thought, rather than do it in a spot where I don't know and don't have access to a vehicle, I'll do it on the run. Usually keep a full set of spare parts, which I've got here, and I've got a full set of spares to do a oil change on both the genset and the main. I've got fuel filters, oil filters. Usually keep a 20 litre drum of oil on board down here. So yeah, all's good. I replaced the anode actually. Well, I was going to replace the anode on the cooling system, which is over this side, which is where the raw water comes in. I'll just give you a bit of a rundown. It comes in through the water pump down here, through this oil cooler for the gearbox, and then back up into this heat exchanger here. Now I tore that heat exchanger and took it down to Rapid Radiators at Nerang on the Gold Coast a couple of years ago, and they gave it a full acid clean and flush, and it's still looking pretty clean. I'll take the end caps off and have a bit of a look inside. But that little brass bolt there, that's the anode, and I took it out last year and there was nothing left of the zinc on it, and but I've taken it out this time, and it's in pretty good nick. A bit of corrosion there, about 10% I suppose. So that was good news, so I've just put it straight back in again. I've got a spare one here if I ever need it. And that's about it for today, I think. I'll get the rest of this oil out, take it down to the recycling place tomorrow, top it up as soon as we get things close, and Bob's your uncle, so to speak. Well, I suppose while we're in the mood for it, I'll give you a bit of an overview of what I've done with the electrical system since we changed over to lithium batteries on the house bank about 2 years ago, 18 months ago I think it was. It was just Christmas 21, and it was quite amazing the difference that made. Initially the batteries were going a bit doughy and we're having trouble keeping the fridges running overnight and that sort of thing, so I thought, well, let's bite the bullet and go with the lithium. So we replaced the house batteries, which are 240 odd amp hour lead acids, with lithium, and the first thing we noticed was that the fridges just jumped to life because they're running on 13 and a half volts all day. They just kept everything nice and cold. But then the next issue, I suppose, was replacing that energy, which we were doing with the Onan genset. We've got a 7 kVA genset in the engine room, and we used to run the engine or the genset about 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, and between 5 and 7 generally most days, and that sort of gave us plenty of hot water with the 240 volt electric hot water system, and kept all the fridges chucked up. We've got an electric hot plate in the galley, which we're going to replace with LPG end of this year, but we were using that for cooking on and so forth, and so we had to run the genset anyway. But since then we've decided, well, I did the numbers on the fuel consumption based on the engine hours of the genset, and we worked out we were using about $750 worth of diesel for the genset, just to keep the electricity supply to the boat. So with all being an electrician with a Clean Energy Council accreditation, I thought, well, we probably should go to solar. So what we've done is we've put this solar array on the boat, which gives us a lot of shade up here, which is a big sort of sundry effect of having these 4 solar panels up. We've got them wired up in a port and starboard string, so we've got 2 panels in series the panels. So what are they about 270 watts, so they're not an overly big panel. So we've got about 600 watts per string, and they collect sunlight. They're obviously not tilted, they're laying flat, which does limit the amount of yield they'll give us during the course of the day. But they're both fed down through the radar arch, down through the boat. It's right down through the galley and down into the engine room, and then into our lazarette. So if we go into the lazarette, you'll see the next stage. So in the lazarette, we've got, I hope you can see this all right, I probably should have turned the lights on, but we've got two MPPT controllers, 100 volt, 30 amp, one for the port string, one for the starboard string, and I quite like this Victron gear, as you can probably tell by the amount of it that's in here, but they're actually linked, Bluetooth linked together, so that they both charge at this similar, how would you say, similar profiles. So we've got a starboard isolator, port isolator, and then they feed straight back into the two lithium batteries that we've got on this side. All this section here is house bank. That section there is the start bank. Now just so I'll give you a bit of an overview on the whole thing. We've got two links distributors here. There's nothing on the boat originally was fused, so I'll put the links distributors on so everything is now fused. It probably went a little bit overboard, but certainly everything's got a fuse on it now. This particular house bank feeds our El Cheapo inverter, which is a 3 kVA King's inverter. We've got this other inner drive charging system, which when running off shore power or the gensets on, we can charge both the house bank, the lithium, and the start bank, which we've got over this side. We've got two batteries on this side for the house, for the start batteries, and we've got two 250 amp lead acids in series for the starting of the genset or starting the main. They also run the bow thruster, the anchor winch, and the davit. So they run all three of those through this system. Well, I'll put another links distributor on here so that we've got everything fused off that bank there also. And with a little battery here is one that runs the generator. So it's got its own sort of standalone system on the generator. So at the moment we've got all refrigeration. That's the freezer condenser unit there, the water cooled condenser unit. It draws quite a bit actually because it's got that water pump that's running all day. But we wouldn't be without our freezer. Now this little DC to DC charger, when I start the main engine up, this little relay cuts in and tells it, righto, the engine's running. When it reaches its 13.5 volts, it's saying that the engine batteries are charged. It will then start diverting power into charging the house bank. So we've got three different sources of power to the boat. We can either go shore power, we can either go inverter, or we can go genset. So it gives us a fair bit of range. I put a little cheap Renogy shunt on here to give us some sort of indication of our state of charge of the batteries, and I must admit that's a very valuable tool. It's sort of wired up to here. This is it here, so it's showing us at the moment that we've got 337 amp hours. We're only charging or discharging at the moment at -3.6 because it's a very cloudy day and we've got all the fridges and everything running. 75% charged. So we're on shore power at the moment, so if I put on the battery charger, which I've just done, the 240 volt one, now you'll see it start flashing and we're charging, putting in 54, 55 amps. and that keeps us topped up. So all in all, we don't need to run the gen set except for days like this, where we are fairly overcast and putting in very little solar. But I've got all the lights on in here at the moment, the 3 fridges running. So it's a fair demand. Cookie's going downstairs just to make sure everything's right. Probably more the brewery than the lazarette, really. Anyway, that's an overview of what we've done with the solar to keep ourselves self-sufficient and off-grid at sea.
Am I on?
Yeah.
Oh, good on you.
Oh, well, I can cut there.
Dear Lord. Right, Thermomix on. We are making, well, it's supposed to be raspberry and white chocolate muffins, but because I've got no raspberries, and somebody didn't turn the Thermomix on the analog because the scales don't weigh properly when you're in motion on the water. So I've got a set of analog scales. They work perfectly. So
What was that that went in there?
100 grams of brown sugar. There is 210 grams of yogurt going in. Three eggs. Do them one at a time because the last time I did them 3 at a time I ended up cracking one rotten one into the last of the eggs, which was pretty disgusting. Nothing quite like a rotting egg. 1, 2, 3. Okay, oil. I don't have grape seed, so I've got vegetable. Not a fan. I'll show you what I mean by the scales, okay, if this actually will work for me. It's a bit slow. Right, now we're done with you. Home. That's why you shut it down properly, John. This is what will happen when you're on the water. Your scales will not measure accurately, they'll just fluctuate. So I've gone back, tared it close enough to that. So I've got to put in 100 grams of oil, or 75 grams, which is always going to be a challenge when the thing's doing that. So about that much will do. No idea how much it is, but it's a jag. Still fluctuating, so you really can't use the scales. It is salt. And vanilla. So pinch of salt, generous pinch of salt. A teaspoon of vanilla from the Vanilla Muse in Mackay, who does the best homemade vanilla ever. That's vanilla paste, sugar-free. Sensational. Thank you, Kathy. Right, mix 10 seconds, 3.5. Okay. 10. Everything else works fine on it. It's just the scales won't work. So a bit of a pain. Now I'm going to add in 40 grams of oats, 250 grams of self-raising flour. I only have plain flour on the boat because I can't be bothered carrying 3 different types of flour. So for every 100 grams of plain flour, put in a teaspoon of baking powder. Chuck that in there. Give it a mix for 5 seconds. Speed 3. Then our raspberries. Going in. And last of all will be our 100 grams of white chocolate, but in our case it's caramel, and it's probably more than 100 grams, but hey, doesn't really matter that much. So they go in, lid goes on, 5 seconds, speed 3. Now I might do it a bit longer because I put whole bananas in there, so I'm going to put it at 10 seconds at 3.5, just to mush up the nannies a bit. And thank you. Probably need to mush up the bananas a bit more. Probably should have mushed up the bananas before they went in. All right, we're going to give it a real burst here for 5 seconds on 5. Should have mashed the bananas first. That's better. Okay. Also, probably should have turned the oven on first too, but you know. Microwave, I need. Bake at 180. It's always 180 in my house. No, 200. There you go. That's why you read. 200. Preheating. Now move all this over to the other side. Here are my tins I prepared earlier. That can go there. That can go there. That can come here. Ice cream scoop is the best thing for doing stuff like this because you get a standard sort of size. I'll start at that end. 1 scoop in each. I use the baking paper because A, it's crap baking paper and I'm trying to get rid of it. And it stops it from sticking. Also gives you a slightly bigger muffin. And who wants a small muffin? If you're having a muffin, it should be a good size. And because they've got fruit and oats, they're healthy. Okay, 1 tray. Second tray, now it says 10 Texas size muffins. Obviously I don't have a Texas muffin pan. So I'm pretty sure we're going to probably get about a dozen slightly smaller ones. Again, this is a book from recipe from Way More Than a Yogurt book of Jeanette Pierce's. So hence the yogurt, etc. in there. That one's going to work out really well. Don't ever buy the cheap Coles baking paper. It be rubbish. Sorry, Coles. And we'll have a dozen. The cameraman will get to lick the bowl. Won't you, cameraman? Oh, you've gone all silent on me.
Cameraman will do as he's told.
Okay, they will go into the oven 200 for 30 minutes. See you when they come out.
Well, now that the cookie jar is full and the engine's serviced, we can get on with the next chore, which will be resurrecting the bowsprit, which has got a bit of water in it. So join us next week for that episode where we resurrect or rejuvenate our bowsprit. Until then, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Mm-hmm.